Time for a brief history lesson brought to you by the Tea Party. No, the original Tea Party, the 1773. Back in December of 1773, a group of Bostonians boarded ships belonging to the East India Company. And as I have told you many, many times on this program, we've talked about this for years. I've written about it in 3 of my books, committed one of the largest acts of vandalism in the history of the world, throwing what would be today over $1 million worth of tea into the Boston Harbor. The name Tea Party actually came in the 1830s, by the way, when George 12-Tree Hughes, George R.T. Hughes, George Robert 12-Tree Hughes, there you go, wrote the one and only eyewitness account of it and called it the Tea Party. It's been called the Tea Party since 1834 when he named it that, but it wasn't called that back then. It was called that incident in Boston Harbor. But in any case, so if you were to go back, get in a Wayback Machine and go back to the Revolutionary War or the Constitutional Convention and say, "Hey, the Tea Party was a great thing," they'd go, "What? Oh, you mean that incident in Boston Harbor?" Anyhow, that Tea Party, as it was called after 1834, was a revolt against transnational corporate power and the corrupt stranglehold that transnational corporate power, specifically the British East India Company, had on the British government and increasingly on the governments of the various states of what then were the colonies of what is now the eastern seaboard of the United States. So fast forward 240 years. Zoop! To now. Tea Party is now owned by transnational corporate power, which is kind of the opposite. I mean, it used to be the ships and the tea was owned. Now it's the Tea Party, and it's being used to subvert our democratic government. It's the opposite. How did this happen? This is incredible. A new study that was published, Tobacco Control, and reported on by Stephen Webster, who's been a guest on this program a number of times. He reported this over at Raw Story. Reveals that today's corporate-funded Tea Party goes back a long ways, well before the election of Barack Obama. Talk of a new Tea Party to advance corporate interests in America began in the 1980s and 1990s when tobacco companies invested heavily in building new broad alliances with other organizations in the hope of fighting back against the emerging anti-smoking agenda or consensus or mood that was sweeping Congress as more and more research was coming out and more people were realizing that their friends and neighbors who were dying of lung cancer were doing so because, and not just that, of a whole variety of lung diseases and diseases throughout the body. If smokers have an increased risk of breast cancer, they have an increased risk of prostate cancer, they have an increased risk of liver cancer, of esophageal cancer, right across the board. Anyhow, according to researchers, tobacco companies like RJR, Lorillard, Philip Morris funneled millions of dollars into an organization called Citizens for a Sound Economy, CSE. Remember that, CSE. Because guess who founded CSE? None other than David Koch. And the purpose of CSE was to build a coalition of tobacco companies and corporate polluters. In the case of David Koch, it was, oil and paper companies, to oppose regulations on smoking and air pollutants being considered by Congress at that time. It's estimated that at least $5.3 million was funneled into CSE by Big Tobacco. Then in 1993, a Philip Morris PR flack wrote a memo outlining a strategy for fighting any new taxes. They were talking about taxes on tobacco to discourage people from smoking it, by joining up with other anti-tax groups to create what this Philip Morris PR flack referred to in his memo as a, quote, new Boston Tea Party, end quote. The memo from 1993 from a Philip Morris guy says, grounded in the theme of the new American tax revolution or the new Boston Tea Party, and that's in quotes, the campaign activity should take the form, 1993, should take the form of citizens representing the widest constituency base mobilized with signage and other attention-drawing accoutrements such as lapel buttons, handouts, petitions, and even costumes. End of quote from the Tobacco Company memo. Ultimately, the tobacco companies failed and were hit with a massive $200 billion legal settlement in 1998. But in 2002, just think about that for a minute. This was 11 years ago. 2002, long before you ever heard of the Tea Party, David Koch's CSE purchased a website, usteaparty.com. Eventually, plans for the Tea Party, that particular Tea Party, were put on hold. After all, a Republican corporatist, George W. Bush, was sitting in the White House, and Republicans were in control of Congress. It was only after the banksters crashed our economy and the Democrats swept into Congress that the so-called Tea Party would be revived. And sure enough, it was revived by none other than David Koch's CSE. Only by now, CSE had split into two AstroTurf corporate-funded organizations, Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Works. From 2009 until today, these organizations have used corporate media outlets like Fox So-Called News and NPR to promote their Tea Party, bussing in uninformed Americans from all around the country to wave signs and rally against their own best interest, or basically rally on behalf of the 1%. So as early as the 1990s, I mean, this was originally planned in response to Clinton. A campaign funded by corporate fat cats and big polluters like the Koch brothers who opposed new regulations and taxes was underway. It was a campaign specifically referred to by some in the tobacco industry as the, quote, new Boston Tea Party, end quote. You just think about this for a minute. The original participants of the Boston Tea Party, what they referred to it, they themselves called the incident in Boston Harbor 240 years ago. A little more than that. 1773 it was. They would have been horrified by this. Many people today think that the Tea Act, which led to the Boston Tea Party, was simply an increase in taxes on tea paid by American colonists. That's where the whole taxation without representation meme came from. But instead, the purpose of the Tea Act was actually to give a tax break to the East India Company so they wouldn't have to pay taxes on British tea that was being exported to the American colonies. It even gave the company a tax refund on millions of pounds of tea that they had in inventory they couldn't sell. This was the largest corporate tax break in the history of the world, and that's why the colonists stood up and said no. The purpose of the Tea Act was to increase the profitability of the East India Company and its stockholders, which, by the way, included the king and most members of the House of Lords, and to help the company drive its colonial small business competitors out of business. So here we are. We have a Tea Party now that was created by the tobacco companies and the oil billionaires. And it's using the metaphors and symbolism of the original Boston Tea Party, which was fought against the billionaires, the East India Company. And here's the ultimate irony. The East India Company also controlled much of the tobacco trade between North America and Europe. We exported tobacco. We imported tea. We exported tobacco. It went through the East India Company. So it was the tobacco companies that we fought against in the Tea Party, and now the Tea Party has been labeled by the tobacco companies.